Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Blind Beggar Pub, and this is Mr. Steve Wraith. He's going to tell you a few things.
Well, thanks everybody for coming on the bus today. Means a lot. My relationship with the Craze started back in 1991. I wrote to the Craze twins after I passed my English exam at school, studying The Profession of Violence by John Pearson. They both wrote back, and when I left school I was in the t-shirt business, putting gangsters on t-shirts, so a bit like that. Pablo Escobar there now, we do that one. I put the Craze on a t-shirt. I sent one into prison, asked them if they'd be up for getting involved in a business relationship with a young lad in Newcastle, and they said yes. The split was 70% of the Craze, 30% of me. I had to put the money in, but I went into business with the Craze as a youngster, and that was where my relationship started. Reggie was in Gartree prison, Ronnie was in Broadway Hospital, and because I was in business with him, I got an invite down to see Reggie Cray in Gartree. Travelled down to meet him. Never been to prison before. Obviously a young lad from Newcastle walking in was a bit of a nervous moment, but when I went in he made us feel really at ease. He was dressed in a blue and white striped prison shirt, a pair of blue jeans. He had a gold crucifix around his neck, a pair of Reebok trainers, a pair of glasses on, his hair was white, combed right back, and he basically just shook my hand and went, "You must be Steve from Newcastle." And that was it. That was the start of the friendship and the relationship, which grew over the years. What I found from Reg was that he was always business orientated in prison. He would always come out on visits with bits of paper from his pocket, uncrumple them, put them on the table with his, scrawly writing on, which I've seen a lot of you have seen. It's a bit like doctors writing, and he would always have different ideas. People would be writing to him, giving him lots of proposals, etc. And he would be coming out and putting plans in motion. He was making an empire behind bars. He then wanted us to go and see his twin brother, Ronnie Cray, who was in Broadway Hospital. Now for Ronnie Cray, it was a lot different for me. It was a hospital for the criminally insane. It was a mental asylum back in the Victorian days. But when I went down there for the first time, it was an incredible feeling to be walking into somewhere like that. It had a medieval feeling. It was being modernised at the time, but it was still the old buildings that we were visiting Ronnie Cray in. And I just remember walking in after doing the security check and walking through the various gates, that we then walked onto the ward. And as you're walking down the ward, you're looking on the doors, and each door had the patient's name on it. We actually were walking down Somerset Ward, which is at the time where Ronnie Cray was. We then walked into this big room at the end, and as you walked in, on the left hand side was like a stage area with big red flock curtains, and then loads of chairs and tables all set out, and at the far end there was a big doorway leading out into a conservatory and then out into Broadmoor's Gardens. And you would stand, go take your turn, sit down at the table where you were allocated, and then you would wait for this man to come in. Now Reg, as you say, was in prison, so his clothes were the same as everybody else that we were visiting that day. But visiting Ronnie Cray was a lot different because he was in hospital. And Ron came in, he had a black pinstripe suit on, his hair was slicked back, he had a pair of gold horn-rimmed glasses, he had a pinky ring on his finger which was worth around about £2,000, a white shirt, starched, with RK still on his white, on his pocket on his shirt, and he had a silk tie on, gold tie pin, and a pair of Gucci shoes, and he looked every part the gangster as he walked in and walked over towards us. And with Ron, it was a lot different. As I say, he came over, he shook my hand, he said, again, very similar to Reg, "You must be Steve from Newcastle." And he sat down and he looked over his glasses at us, and he put his hand on my knee, and he goes, "Steve, you don't mind that I'm bisexual, do you?" And being a heterosexual Geordie lad, I wasn't quite sure what to say, but I said, "Look, Ron, I'm not that way inclined." And he goes, "Good." And that was it. He smiled, clicked his fingers, and this became the order of the day whenever you visited Ron. He clicked his fingers and someone would come over. It would be a nurse, not prison officers, a nurse. And they would come and give him a John Player special cigarette, and he would light the cigarette for him because he wasn't allowed to have a lighter. He then clicked his fingers again, they would come over and they would take a drinks order. Ron would drink non-alcoholic Caliber lager at the visit. And you would have a visit for like an hour and a half. Ron always liked to get back early to his his room because he wanted to beat the rush, he said. Didn't like to get in the way of the other nutters. That's what he always used to say. But the visits with Ron, as I say, were a lot different. He wanted to know what was going on the outside. He had a big interest in football and boxing. He wanted to know what was happening in the music charts. And he was interested in what was happening with Reg. And I think the one thing that I got from visiting from Reg and Ron were two completely different things. Visiting Ron, he had compassion for his brother's situation. He always felt that it was his fault that Reg had ended up in the predicament that he had, being in prison for the rest of his life. And his main focus was to get Reg out and make him a free man. And they used to fight hammer and tongue on the two visits that they used to have with each other a year, because they used to visit each other a year. Once Reg would go to Broadway, the other time Ron would go to a prison that Reg was at, and the authorities allowed that because they were twins. They would always argue over this, and Reg said, no, I'm just as much to blame as you are. He would never allow Ron to take the responsibility. But Ron was always very, caring about his brother. The visits with Reg, what